Where does EMS fit into the fire service? Today, I'm joined by a special guest and a good friend who has a very similar background to myself and currently works as a career firefighter paramedic. We're going to discuss the pros and cons of private EMS and fire based EMS and how the pathways of getting into EMS factor into the overall picture. Welcome to Profess EMS, the podcast dedicated to educating, training, mentoring, and inspiring EMS educators and providers alike. Whether you're looking to grow as an educator or prosper as a provider, sit back, open those neuro pathways, and let's get to it. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to episode 13. This episode is brought to you by Master Your Medics. Outside of my role as education manager of Master Your Medics, I still work in the field as a provider and educator, and these thoughts, ideas, and statements do not necessarily represent those of my affiliations. So let's get into it. Today, I have a special guest with me, so I'm just going to kick it off and let her introduce herself. So Jennah, it's all you.
So I don't know if there's a video with this or not, but I'm Jennah Marsh, formerly Jennah Larac, for those who have known me for longer than a couple of years. I'm just going to do a blanket statement that this also does not represent anybody who I work with and for. These are all my personal opinions. I do currently work for Master Your Medics as an instructor. I took a little bit of a hiatus because my kid was having some issues. But that's all figured out now, so I'm hoping to make a comeback soon. But otherwise, my full-time job is as a firefighter paramedic for Security Fire Department here in Colorado. That being said, a little bit of background. So I've been a paramedic for 7 years now. I was an EMT for 3 before that. I've worked for a couple other fire departments. I've worked in the private EMS. I worked on the helicopter for a little bit. Turns out flying isn't for me. I kind of get a little bit sick. So not a big fan. But prior to that, I did actually do a stint in prison. And by that, I mean I was a corrections officer. I didn't actually work in prison. So the nice thing is, though, is that I know what prison is like, so I know I won't do well in there. So that is always in the back of my mind. But before that, I was in the military. So I served in the U.S. Navy for a little bit, and I was actually a welder, so had zero medical experience prior to any of this. So that's where I've been for the last over 20 years, I think. Close to it. That hurts.
Well, like our road and our conversations together, I never knew that you were a welder.
Yeah. So a lot of people, whenever I say that I was in the Navy, they're like, "Oh, were you a corpsman?" And I'm like, not even close to medical. Not even a little bit. I think I got some like first aid, maybe the combat course or whatever when I was in, but that was as close to medical as I got.
Wow. So like going from the Navy and welding, like really what brought you into the fire service?
So oddly enough, before, I think I was actually already enlisted, but I was in the delayed entry program because the seat for originally what I went in for, I was going to be a nuke. So I went to nuke school, which meant that I was going to be working on the nuclear reactors. Turns out that's not for me. I'm really not great at math. And that's a lot of physics equations that you have to memorize. So, nope, ended up transitioning to a steel worker. That being said, that's the long way of saying that I was enlisted but hadn't left. And then I was actually watching I Now Pronounce You, Chuck and Larry, with my best friend in theaters. So, like, we were in the theater watching that when it came out. And I know that that's an over-exaggeration of stuff, right? Because I'm smart sometimes. But I was just like, I really like the camaraderie that they have. And that was what I wanted. And so I actually, thought about like, maybe I'll be a firefighter. EMS didn't even cross my mind. It was just about firefighting. So funnily enough, my best friend, she actually went through the paramedic school. She went through the fire academy down there in Texas. And then I went to the Navy, did my thing. She actually is a very nice and kind human being. So she doesn't have the callous personality that it kind of takes to be in fire and EMS. So she didn't finish that. She actually just graduated from nursing school. So much better suited for her. But anywho, I was actually kind of jealous of what she was doing. And then I was already in the Navy. So I did my obligation. And I say obligation. It's something that I'd wanted to do since I was little. So military was always something that I'd wanted to do from like a tot. But then after I got out, I was just like, what do I want to do? So I've always been kind of attracted to medicine to an extent. I thought about continuing on with welding, but the best way to make money would be to be a pipe welder, which is essentially what I did when I was in. But the relationship that I was in, I was actually married at the time, and he was just like, why can't you pick a more feminine job? So then I was just like, yeah, yeah. So then I tried to go to nursing. I got my CNA license because that was a prerequisite for nursing school. And I know this is a super long story, but one of the girls that I was in CNA class with, she had cancer, and I went to visit her in the hospital. And that was when I realized, like, even though she was a model patient, just a sweetheart, I was just like, I can't do this. This isn't for me, because I didn't even think about emergency medicine. Didn't even cross my mind. So I was just thinking about being a floor nurse because my grandma was a floor nurse, and that was just kind of what was in the back of my mind when it came to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I can't do this. And so I was working at the prison, and I was like, what do I want to do? And I was just like, oh yeah, I wanted to be a firefighter back in the day. So then I know that you have to, like, the biggest thing is I didn't want to do medicine in particular. I wanted to be a firefighter. That was it. Just wanted to be a firefighter. But I was like, one of the things that they would want is for you to at least have your EMT. So I was just like, all right, cool. I'll go to EMT school, get that, and then I'll work on, doing a fire academy, because EMT school was one semester and that was it. And that's if you go through a college. So got my EMT, and then I was still just like, oh, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a firefighter. I got hired on for the fire department, but I was on the ambulance, and I had no idea what I was doing. I almost quit because there was a person there that was not a good role model, I would say. Flat out, he was a dick.
I think we can all relate to somebody like that in our career.
Yeah, and he even said, like, do you even want to be here? And I'm just like, I don't know what I don't know. Like, I'm not good at this because I don't know. So then I finally just got on with a private ambulance. And luckily for me, I got on with immediately as an EMT on a 911 car. So I was running 911s just right off the bat. And then here in Colorado, the nice thing is that when you get your EMT, you can get an additional certification. So you can get your IV cert. So you can start IVs, you can give fluids. You're essentially, in most other states, what would be considered an advanced. I mean, with the exception of a few drugs. But yeah, no, we were doing ALS procedures, and I use air quotes on that.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so after that, then I was just like, all right, well, now that I feel fairly confident as an EMT, I feel like I can't do enough. I'm just like, I don't know what to do with my hands. So that's when I was just like, you know what? I'll go to paramedic school. So I did. And then I was just like, oh yeah. After I got my paramedic, oh yeah, I wanted to be a firefighter. Maybe let's get back on that track. But
very cool. So I mean, it's I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that Chuck and Larry inspired them to be a firefighter. Generally that's like, well, I watch episodes of Emergency or Rescue Me or hell, even Chicago Fire, but never Chuck and Larry. I mean, that's kind of like saying that, Super Troopers or Reno 911 made you want to become a cop. That's probably one of maybe one.
I think it was just because you got to see the camaraderie and the brotherhood. And I got that in the military. And whether or not you like that person was a different category. Like, you might not have liked them, but you knew that when it came down to it, like, they had your back. Like, they were your family. Because I mean, let's be honest. Like, we don't always like our siblings or whatever family members we have. Like, you love them, but you don't always like them, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So I mean, like, same. And
I mean, and that's that's a really similar to pathways I did too. I mean, I grew up in a firefighter household. I mean, growing up, I never wanted to be in the fire service. Like, my dad was. He retired as a chief after many, many years. And he was just always busy. Schedules were just weird and it just never really entertained me. And my grandfather was a firefighter, and I just had, I don't know, I really had no interest until one day, then it just clicked. And then I think one thing that really boosted it was just the competitiveness of getting into the fire service through civil service and testing and the CPATs and just really in that competition phase of it, right? So that really intrigued me. And then kind of like you, it's like, well, in the back of my mind, it's like, well, I want to become a firefighter, and that it's going to take a while. Like it's just testing, getting on list, and this and that. So it's like, well, in the meantime, I'll go get my EMT. Then maybe that'll just, I know it can't skip me a bunch across a whole bunch of people on the civil service list, but maybe it just makes me look more appealing. Or like when I get hired, maybe I'll just have less of a steep of a learning curve, right? So I remember being in my EMT class, like, "Hey, what makes you want to get into EMS?" I was like, "Well, I'm here because I want to become a firefighter." And there was, other people are like, "I want to help my community." I was once picked up by EMS. That saved my life. And there was like me and another guy that were like, "I want to be a fireman, and that's why I'm here." And like really, like no interest in EMS. And now, I mean, I'm in it up to my ears, and I still love it. Like even though I'm in the fire service. I mean, I work for a fire-based EMS system, and I love the fire service. And I am one of those, I guess, unicorns that I am a firefighter who actually enjoys the EMS side of the job as well as anything else. Now, there's a lot of things fire side that I don't like hazmat. I have zero desire to be a glow stick, none. Water, not a big fan of that either. And but there's certain things, right? I like EMS and I like rescue. But that's, I think one thing that's really great about the fire service is it isn't just being a firefighter anymore. I mean, we're really um, all encompass of first responders. We're really like a public service agency, right? And I see more and more of these popping up of like in my state, we just got one. We have a county-based emergency services agency now, and that's what it's called. It's not a fire department. It's not EMS. It's a fire department that has transporting ambulances, and they are referred to as X County Emergency Services Agency. So we're emergency services, pretty much all encompassing except law enforcement, which that's a whole other thing in itself because there are some of those places that are like public service districts. I think
Yeah.
is what they're calling them. It's like fire and like fire police where you carry turnout gear in the trunk of your cruiser. That's weird. I don't understand that part. But anyways, yeah, I think we shared a lot of the same pathways of how we got into the fire service. So, how do you think that in your career as a firefighter paramedic, how do you think that having that EMS background um, maybe changes how you function in the fire service as compared to those who just got right into the fire service and had really no training or no EMS experience?
Um, I think it makes me a little bit more well-rounded because I do have. So one of the things that I did when I went to paramedic school is I was able to choose where I was able to do my internship. So instead of doing an internship where I worked in the same area that I worked, I went to a different one so that way I could see how they operate. So by doing EMS and working in different agencies in different areas, I was able to encompass like long distance transports, like backcountry rescue,
Yeah.
or where you have to do the turn and burn, right, where you get call after call after call after call, where you just like, hey, bringing in this person, here you go, here's your report, grab my signature, I gotta go, I got another one. So where you're just getting inundated and you don't have any rest. So it gives you the ability to be able to work on your critical thinking a lot faster, to prioritize what you need to get done, to be less scared and a little bit more aggressive in the treatments that you want to do, while still also being a little bit more reserved depending on what you see, right? I also forgot that I worked in the hospital for a little bit, so that helped too. So that way I could see, like, the nice thing was is I would see what things were brought in with, see what they presented as, and then see what they were diagnosed with and the treatments that would happen. So that also helps me determine, like, hey, what am I going to do for this patient? And let's be honest, as much as everyone hates it, most, most of the calls are EMS related. So that makes me a little bit more of an asset because I have that medical experience, that medical background, that medical knowledge, and love for medicine in general that will help our community and our patients in the long run.
Oh, that's a awesome mindset. It makes me think of my first fire department job. I mean, I'm working at my second career department, but the original one I worked at for about 3 years. I became a medic there, and this was a fire department that, I mean, we ran a decent amount of fires, some car wrecks, and and a lot of medical calls, same as every fire department in the country, really. But we only ran as first responders. So most of the people there were EMRs, had a pretty big handful of EMTs, and then there were two of us that were paramedics. And actually, I became a paramedic at that department, and I was only working, EMS as a paramedic part time. Right. So I became a paramedic this department, and with that, being as one of the newer guys, we would kind of rotate out days. So the new guy was always on, like, the EMS buggy that ran out of that station and chased the medical calls. Well, then as I got a little bit more time on, there was new guys under me, and I would kind of rotate in days depending on which apparatus I was assigned to. If I was assigned to an engine, I'd be on it like every third shift or something. But then what I would do, I would just volunteer to be on that chase vehicle all the time. And guys were like, "Why are you doing that? You don't have to do that. It's this other new guy's job. It's what he's supposed to do." It's like, well, that makes no sense. If we're running a medical call on this shift, I'm the highest trained medical person working today. So wouldn't it make more sense that we send the most trained person out on a medical call rather than sending two EMRs out and leaving a paramedic in the station? I was like, plus the city paid part of the way for me to go to medic class. So why not support the citizens who really kind of helped support me via tax money and levies and all those things? Like, it helped me become a paramedic. So I felt like it would just kind of behoove me to, if I'm the paramedic and the highest trained person, I'm going to go on that call. Like, if there was a technical rope rescue, you'd want the rope guy to go out and handle the ropes, not sit back just because it's not his turn. So it was kind of weird. Like, in that, it was a weird dynamic that I was volunteering to go on these calls that not other guys didn't want to go to, but like that's what it is. We're there for them. So I pride myself on that too, that I was able to do that. And in that same token, and I talked a little bit before this about the like the stigma around EMS, right? That, like, suddenly people who were in EMS and that was their career and that was their passion, and they did that and they got on a fire department because it was potentially more lucrative career, right? If you go from a third service EMS agency that's private, like you said, we have these turn and burns because you're at a bare minimum operating cost, whereas working for municipality, county, state government, whatever, it generally tends to be a more lucrative career.
Yeah.
So people get into that for kind of, to advance themselves. But then suddenly they get in it and it's like, EMS, you can't like that. No, there's fire trucks here. We can only like fire stuff. You're not allowed to like EMS. Right. And I always try to keep the mentality of, like, we're really doing it for them. Yeah, some of these calls are mundane, but so is going to Meemaw, who burned her Pop Tart for the 5th time this week. Right. So we run those mundane calls on both sides of the house, but I always try to keep my mind that, hey, if I'm one of the highest trained persons, I should go on that call. And I'm glad that I'm able to have a higher level of training to provide better care for these people. And I would relay that to the guys on our department, and just like, hey, they would gripe like, oh, EMS, and we call you names and this and that, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that. But it would give me a lot of grief because I enjoyed EMS. And like, well, you need to know your role, you need to know your space, and would give me crap because I wanted to go on these calls. But then I'm just kind of point out to them, it's like, so if you're an EMR and I'm a paramedic, and 85% of our calls are EMS in nature, doesn't that make me a more well-rounded asset for the city than you? And that didn't set real well. But in my 26-year-old mind, I thought that was a good proving ground. But to guys that had 20 years on the job, that conversation didn't go well.
Well, so
Um,
if you think
sure.
about it, right? And I don't mean to interrupt you, but like if you
Yeah.
think about it on EMS calls, because we are a transporting fire department as well, so we have ambulances, which is what I'm on all the time, and I enjoy it. Um, but if you think about it, if you are on an EMS call and your chief shows up and he's an EMT and you're a paramedic, right? It's an EMS call. You are El Jefe Uno. You are the one that is running the shots. The only person that would outrank me on an EMS scene would be my EMS chief. So I don't care what your title is, captain, chief, whatever. Obviously, respect respect the title, respect the position, and hopefully the person. But ultimately, what you say as the paramedic on an EMS scene goes. Huh? They don't like that either.
Yeah, that's a tough battle. I mean, it's I've run into similar instances of that, and then in the opposite too. Whereas if you're a paramedic and you're at a scene, but you're there with the fire department and you're running and serving a role as incident commander of something, and they need a paramedic, they look at you weird and they kind of expect you to be able to take that IC hat off and like, well, you just need we need a paramedic. You got to come here, and it's not as easy as that. Like you just can't leave control of a scene to suddenly become a paramedic. So both sides of that conversation are tough sometimes. Maybe that's a whole nother podcast for another day of, trying to play those dual roles sometimes and how that line is really, really gray and pretty thin sometimes.
Everything in this job is gray.
Oh
If
yeah.
there are some people that still see it in black and white and like this is how it's supposed to be, but one of the nice things is, in kind of getting off of the topic a little bit, but one of the nice things is that we've started to see that things aren't black and white. So now instead of rigid protocols, we have guidelines and it's more of a flow chart. So if you want to
Yes.
skip X and Y and go straight to Z because of whatever, go for it.
Yeah, 100%. We actually ironically had a very similar conversation at the firehouse today about just, things getting pushed into EMS. Kind of ties back into my previous podcast about what I'd do if I was king of the world. But things getting pushed in EMS, right? So we and also in EMS we kind of get things put onto us that say, hey, you as a paramedic, you really have to do this new skill set now. You have to give these medications. You have to get this extra knowledge. Whereas in the fire side, it's like not always are places like, well, you have to become, a trench rescue technician. You have to obtain your swift water technician. Right. So there's kind of those other gray areas in that too, right? Of what's being mandated in our job and what's not, right? And like what part is elective.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a
Um,
lot more change on the EMS side than there is the fire, and the fire side it takes a lot longer to implement, unfortunately.
oh yes. Change is such a dirty word.
Uh, it's it's kind of a catch-22, right? Uh,
Yes.
we want change, we want change, but then we fight it when it happens because oh, we didn't used to do it this way, we didn't used to do it that way, we whatever, but we want it. So it's kind of like a toddler. We're just like, oh, I want a drink, but I don't want it from that cup. That's
Right.
the wrong
Yeah.
color.
I'm gonna sit down here and I'm gonna throw myself in circles until I get my way.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, you brought up a good point, I think, and that was like, I was taking some notes here about, what makes, I think, somebody who already has some, EMS experience get into the fire service. Like you said, I mean, on average, 60 to 70% of the calls in the nation that go on that a fire department's responding to are EMS in nature, right? And 50% of EMS in the United States is provided by a fire department. Right. So I think that, those notes you said of, you've already kind of got a lot of experience that you've worked at busy agencies. You know what it's like to have a patient for a long period of time. And generally, those people are having pretty good experience. Now, granted, experience is kind of a vague term, if you will. Like there's experience and there's tenure, completely different topics. Right.
Yep.
But, and that was, as soon as you said, I wrote it down of just like transport times. Right. And we make a conversation at my department because we have pretty short transport times. I mean, in our first due area, we're maybe 7, maybe 10 minutes tops from a hospital. A lot of them are 3 or 4 minutes. So, that infamous saying, well, too close for ALS. Well, a lot of times you are just too close to get a lot of things done. Where we have providers where they never really worked on an ambulance until they came to our fire department, and they never really got to practice their skills or utilize their skills, um, at our department, right? Like we're very heavy on paramedics, because like in the opposite, like all of our officers are paramedics. To be able to promote at our agency, you have to be a paramedic. So chief, deputy chief, captains, lieutenants, every one of those is a paramedic. So we're roughly 90% ALS. Um, so that's one thing that is kind of unique there, where we're bringing these people who are EMTs and who may or may not have ever worked on an ambulance. And if they haven't ever worked on an ambulance, they may not have really or ever really even going to get the chance to do a lot of patient care because they're always with a paramedic, right? So I think having that experience does kind of make you more well-rounded. And like my point before, there's a lot less steeper of a learning curve into what's really going on.
Yeah. It was kind of funny. I was having a conversation with someone that Ross works with, and then we were talking about transport times. And she asked me how long my transport time was. And I was just like, about 15, 20 minutes, depending on where we're coming from, sometimes longer, because we do, not only do we service our community, but we also are automatic, not mutual, but automatic aid for a couple of other agencies. So those agencies are not transporting departments. So we are their ambulance. And so we can go way far in BFE, and then our transport time has now turned to 45 minutes to an hour. And so it blew, it was his lieutenant, Ross's lieutenant. It just blew her mind that our transports were that long, to include even when we're close, right? So even our closest area that we go to, unless it's mutual aid for like Colorado Springs, but even our closest, we're still about 15, 20 minutes away from the closest hospital. Um, but again, it also gives you a chance to do good medicine, prioritize what you need to get done, but then also like get people there sooner than later. So if you're just like, "Ugh, I don't know what to do," like you don't have to wait a super long time, but still, I've had it to where it was 5, 10, 12 minutes tops to the hospital. So I'm just like, okay, we have 0 ambulances available. We have 3 calls holding. Like this person needs X, Y, and Z. I was just like, I can get this done and I can get this done. Um, so I'm going to do those things, and then they can do the rest of the hospital. So that was what was nice, is being able to prioritize and just get it done quick and in a hurry, and realize, because and this is something that we were talking about recently, realizing that there are some departments, there are some agencies, some ambulances, some crews in general that will stay on scene to treat the patient, when in reality, our office is the back of the ambulance. So, you're going to transport, get them in the back, do everything in route.
Yeah.
And you can turn around and be available for your agency.
Yeah,
And
100%. 100%. And that is there's some like committees that I'm part of, and can't go too much into them for all the non-disclosures and stuff, but there is, like, with on-scene times, there's so much data and research that's out now about the overall severity of patients relating to on-scene times, right? So, like, sometimes longer on-scene times definitely do relate to poor outcomes in these patients. Again, maybe a whole nother podcast for another day.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that experience that some people were getting in the rural setting, and being able to like utilize their skills and being able to see diversity and seeing changes in patient status, like, hey, they're truly getting multiple assessments done, rather than, well, I got a blood pressure, then I drove across the street and I was here, that are simply seeing transports that they're not really having time to do anything. So I think it kind of, the knowledge base, but again, experience is what you make of it. But I do think that can kind of make it more well-rounded. How do you think that compares to the people who maybe aren't getting any EMS experience before, or are getting all of their EMS training at a fire department?
Um, it kind of makes it hard. We had one person in particular. She is a very sweet human, and she had been out of EMS for a while, for like 9 years, and we had a very hard conversation. She was my trainee, um, and you could tell that she just it wasn't clicking at the time at the moment. But I was just like, I'm going to tell you right now that a bunch of the medics that are here started off in the private ambulance. So that way you can determine what you need to get done sooner than later. You can determine, you can prioritize, you can figure out what needs to happen for this particular person based on the transport time that you have and how they're presenting. I was just like, we didn't get this experience here. Most of us came here with previous experience from a private ambulance. It's just like, also hear me out on this, right? When you are learning, because our schedule is a 48-96, when you are learning, if you mess up on hour one of your 48, you're going to be in your head for the next 48 hours. You are going to sit there and you are going to beat yourself up over that, and it is going to snowball, right? And it's going to have that effect, and you are just going to be beat down for the rest of the 48 hours, and it's going to continue. But if you start off at a private ambulance company, getting those 911 calls, getting those interfacility transfers that everyone hates, I hate them. You get to go home after 12 hours and reset. You get to leave it away, go home, reset, come back, start again later, instead of having that build and build and build for 2 days. You don't get to go home. You don't know when you're going to get a break, right? Like you're probably not going to get to sleep the whole night. So you're going to be tired, and then you're going to be already in your head about things, and you're just going to be like, instead of being able to go home, reset, regroup. So I think, as much as I don't like the private ambulance company, because mostly the pay and how they treat their employees, and every agency is different. I actually didn't have a terrible experience with mine, except for the pay. But I really think that having those quick turnarounds, that being in a busy system, makes you better for your critical thinking, right? Because that's the bread and butter of being in EMS versus fire. And I'm not saying that fire doesn't have to do critical thinking, right? But if you think about it, 70% of the United States firefighters are volunteer. So anybody can put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. Now, whether or not they do it well is a different category.
Yeah.
And that's really what it boils down to, is that there are certain, ways and strategies that you can go and like make an offensive attack and, prevent other structures from going down, this, that, and the other. But that's few and far between that you have to use those critical thinking skills, versus when you're an EMS, like you are critically thinking all the time. And that's kind of what I like about it. But if you're in a slower system, it's a little bit hard to develop those skills to it's like sharpening a knife, right? Like if you don't have the right tools, if you don't have whatever, like it's not going to be as sharp. Like it might get the job done, right? But is it going to get it done well? No. And are you more likely to hurt yourself or others because you have a dull knife? Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Great analogy.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the one thing about firefighting, right? Is that as much as I love fire, and that's the whole reason I got into this, if you made me choose firefighting over EMS, I'm going to pick EMS because I get to do my job all the time, and I get to use my brain piece. So I'm constantly active, I'm constantly thinking, I'm constantly engaged.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I love the critical thinking aspect of it. And like you said, like in the fire side of things, yeah, you have to critically think. I mean, understanding fire science and dynamics and a lot of that, there's a lot that goes into that too. And it is more than just, hey, put the wet stuff on the red stuff, right? But like in EMS, I think back to the training captain I had at my first department, gung ho, great fireman, extremely knowledgeable, hated the EMS with a passion, did not like it. But he told me, and I don't know, this may not even be a thing he ever wanted somebody to know, but he kind of told me in a one on one conversation, he said, in your career, he's like, as much as I hate EMS, in your career, you will make the biggest of a difference on a medical call. And at that point, he'd had like 25 years in the job. He's like, in my career, he said, one of the biggest, he's like, the call of my career was like saving a kid that was choking. He's like, yeah, I've pulled people out of buildings and this and that, and went to bunches of fires. And like the older timers, they went to way more fires than we ever will. But he's like, that was the call of my career. Was I showed up first as a first responder, and a kid was choking, and saved them from choking. And he's like, I probably won't do anything cooler than that in my career. Um, and, and I just don't understand like where some people lose that sight, right? Like you said, we run all these fires and they're cool. And I mean, I like fire as much as anybody. I mean, there maybe people like fire more than me because I like the critical thinking. I like EMS. I like technical rescue. Like if I had my choice at a large city, I'd be on a rescue or like a squad, right? That's what I like is the technical aspect of things. And just really having to kind of nerd out on some things, right?
Yes.
That's the stuff that I really like. I really like honing in my inner nerd on different things and getting into rabbit holes. So where do you think, I mean, you and I talked a little bit before this of like, where have we lost that, right? Like going to FDIC and these other conferences, there's always the harping, the harping, the harping of do it for them. We're here for them. That's who we do it for as the citizens. But at the same time, I feel like that we kind of lose sight of that because so many people can seem okay with being mundane or mediocre in their EMS skills to take care of people, but by golly, you can't have any slack. Like there is no room for mediocrity or mistakes on the fire ground. But yeah, human life. Yeah, well, what's that protocol say? That doesn't matter. What's the dosing of that again? Oh, whatever. Like that, it's acceptable, right? And I think that's where some things between like those who got an EMS first and those who are brought up through EMS in the fire service. I think that's where we see a lot of conflict, right? Is people who really had that true passion with EMS, like they get into the fire service. And I don't want to seem that like every bit of the fire service hates EMS, but
But
I do
there's
think
a
that
pretty big amount.
yeah, and I do think that we lose some of that where you're not saying that we're not focusing on the EMS side of things because yeah, we have to with CEs and different things, but it's like it's almost like a culture, right? But then I have noticed that you find some of these people like in public, they're like, oh yeah, I don't that EMS call sucked. But then you get somebody like me who nerds out on EMS and then one on one, they want to have a lot of conversations about EMS. So it's like it's not vanity affair to like really like EMS and the fire service. And I don't understand why, because we're doing it for them. So if that's the majority of our calls, why would we not want to be stellar in every single aspect of our job? Like to me, there is no room for mediocrity in any single thing we do, whether it's fire, technical rescue, EMS, you know, fire investigation, inspections, pre-planning, safety, public outreach, whatever it is, we should be stellar in every single aspect of it.
Yeah. And I think some of that comes from like the top down, right? And I know that sounds bad, but because most of the leadership does have that older mindset to where it's just like, oh, like we're going to be, fire based, fire, 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 fire. Um, some of that is still coming from the top down. It's going to be a lot of change that's got to be implemented in that because we've had previous leadership that was all about like, oh, I'm going to buy all these like cool fire trucks. I'm going to spend lots of money to like deck this out and it's going to be amazing. We're going to have like tech rescue stuff. We never use it, but yet our ambulance didn't have AC in the back. Like, come on, man. Like, and so I think a lot of that is a lot of the older generations where it's still kind of coming down. And we all know that the C word change, everyone hates that word, but everyone wants it to happen, right? But we fight it, we fight it, we fight it. So I think until we can get that mindset of like, let's promote change in the fire service to make it more recognizable, like for EMS, like that that's still going to be that, right? It's still going to be that mindset of like, oh, we're fire, we're fire, fire. And there are so many fire departments that don't do transports, right? So they're just like, oh, like we'll take our time getting there. Like we'll let the ambulance get on scene first.
Yeah.
It's just a medical call. It'd be like, hey man, like the reason that we have an engine and an ambulance come is because like if the ambulance is busy, you guys are supposed to be able to at least get vitals and start treatments on this patient. Like that is literally the reason that like you are supposed to be cross-trained for medical. Paramedic, that's not a necessity, right? Because ABCs essentially is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Airway, breathing, circulation. A good EMT basic should be able to do that, right? But you still have those people that are just like, oh, fire is all, like it's all about fire, blah blah blah. I will admit that one of the big reasons that I love my department is because our EMS captain, I'm sad we're losing him because he got into PA school. So congratulations for him. That's what he's wanted. But he is so big into medicine. He was one of those people that would nerd out and be like, hey, like I love this, I love that. And then also we have an EMS chief that again is like just hand in hand with our medical director and being like, hey, like, can we try this? Can we do this? And advocates for a lot of
That's
stuff.
awesome.
Yeah. And the nice thing is that we're not micromanaged, right? So like we're pretty progressive in the things that we can do as long as we can justify why we did or didn't do something. This was another thing that I was able to experience between the privates and like my department in general is I had a call and it was an extended scene time. And it was warranted. So the EMS chief, he was a captain at the time. He was just like, hey, is there any particular reason that you were on scene for an extended amount of time on this call? And originally, like having come from the privates, I was like getting ready to be on the defense and be like, ooh, all right. And I was just like, yes. And he's like, okay. I was like, what? So I think some of that too, is that like with medicine, right? Is that you're so afraid of getting in trouble that you just don't want to do it. So like, why not be on the fire side? If you let something burn, if something burns down to the ground, like how much trouble are you really going to get in? Because it's fire, it's destructive. That's likely what was going to happen anyway. So like,
Yeah.
what are the repercussions for the most part?
And I'm like you, and I love my agency, and I don't ever want to think like any of the listeners who
Oh yeah.
know where I work think that like, oh man, their department like hates CMS. And here's the ironic thing about it: like these people, one-on-one conversations, they'll talk EMS. They will like in public, like, oh, we don't want to talk about this. It's bad. It's like I'll play dress up with my daughter, and she can paint my toenails, but I'm not going to be out here in public, showing off my painted toenails, right? But it's just because it's one of those things. But for the listeners who work in like fire-based EMS, listen, look at me. It is okay to like EMS.
It is.
It's going to be okay. It is okay to be good at every aspect of your job, especially that stuff that you're doing the majority of, right? And that's the thing. Like these guys that I work with, and I see around all the time, like they make fun of EMS. And granted, humor is part of our defense mechanism. I get it, but like they try to give off this demeanor that they don't like it and they're not good at it. But gee, like they are some fantastic paramedics, but they just don't want to admit to it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not good at my job. I'm not a good paramedic. Like, no, you are. It's okay. It's okay to be a good paramedic and a good firefighter. Like you can do both.
Yes.
Right. Like you can do both. As much as a bad reputation as like, some second or third service EMS providers give, fire-based EMS, a ton of fire-based EMS people are extremely good at their job,
Yes.
right? Because they are tested, they're vetted to be some of the most knowledgeable, the most well-fit, the most well-rounded people, and they are great at their job. They may not express it and wear all the t-shirts and the EMS swag and give all these accolades, everything like, look at me, I'm an EMS. They may not want to talk about it, but deep down, they are very good at it. But there are some who don't want to. So some of this is kind of targeted towards those few who think you don't have to be or want to think that it's okay to be funny or like laugh because you goofed up at a patient, right? Like a big soapbox of mine, like we talked about, is if as a fire officer, if somebody comes off the rig and like to a fire scene without a tool, the infamous saying is you're just an informed bystander and you're going to get chastised for that. Like you come off the rig ready. But at the same time, I hold the same standard to the other token. Like if you come off the ambulance and that call is for difficulty in breathing or chest pains and you enter the house with a clipboard, like we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because A standard is a standard. Come off of your apparatus prepared, ready to do the work you need to do. Like, that is truly why we are there for them. A lot of times, yeah, the 911 system is abused, but some of these times these people call and it is the worst day of their life. They want you to show up and be that neurosurgeon, physicist, you know, mechanical rocket engineer, neuroscientist, right? They want the cream of the crop. They call 911. There's no 811, right? They call 911 because they want you to be good at everything.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, hey, there's one number I call. It's like the old, beacon of Batman went up in the air. Like, we need somebody special. Right. And then when they call 911, that is us. We are those special people show up. So just be good at everything that you do.
Right. Well, and then, so I think we have, my shift had 2 engine medics. We had a couple of engine medics. Most of the time they were on the heavy rescue, which makes sense for the most part. I think there should be probably 1 ALS on every engine, just because, like, if we are busy, we don't have any ambulances, whatever. But the funny thing is that, and we have junior firefighters, so every now and then they get to tag along and do ride-alongs with us. But my partner and I were talking about a couple of the people that we work with, and I was just like, oh yeah, like, this particular engine medic, like, intimidates the shit out of me. Like, just his knowledge, I'm just like, oh, like, I know I'm not a terrible paramedic, like, I'm not, but I'm just like, I'm scared to look dumb around him because he's super smart. Now, he's nice. He's very approachable, very approachable. But, like, just the amount of knowledge that he has. And the nice thing is that most of our engine medics, there are some that are just like, oh, I'm on the engine because I don't want to be on the ambulance. Like, I kind of like medicine, but I don't want to do it full time, and I get that. But, like, this particular one, he is all about, like, let's get better, like, let's do better, like, let's
Heck yeah.
be more involved. Let's, do more training. And so that junior firefighter decided to tell him that I was intimidated by him. He's like, oh, so what's this that I hear that you're scared of me? And I'm like, look here, I'm not scared of you. Like, I will punch you in the face right now, but you do intimidate me because you're smart, but I will cut you down.
Oh, you can. That's such a bad move to let somebody know, like, just exploit what your weakness is, or let somebody know that there's a button that can be pushed, right?
Oh yeah, well, and that's what. So most people don't understand what I'm talking about when I'm saying, like, I'm not telling you where I tie my goat. Yeah, right. Most people don't know what I'm talking about when I say that. Is because, like, if I tell you where I tie my goat, you're gonna go mess with my goat, right? Like,
Yeah,
you're just gonna
100%.
mess it up. So if I tell you what bothers me or whatever, like, you're just gonna pick at it. So I'm like, because that's what we do. We exploit each other's weaknesses.
So, like, we've chatted a bunch about how, blending EMS into the fire service, whether you came from it or you got into it. So from, both of us seeing both sides of it, like from private EMS, pretty much every aspect of pre-hospital medicine, into the fire service, strict fire and fire-based EMS. What do you think is something that, like, the fire service can learn from EMS and the EMS can learn from the fire service? So 2 things.
So that's kind of hard, right? I wish the fire service could learn that medicine is cool. Like, it's cool. You do. Yay! Because that's the majority of your calls, right? So, like, why not be good at it and enjoy it? Like, if you're dreading going to the medical call every time, don't get me wrong, we all have those addresses where we're like, oh, that place again, right? But, like, for the ones that are cool, that, like, you do get to do fun things with, like, it's fun. And selfishly, one of the things that I like about being an EMS is, the best way to put it, immediate gratification of your job.
Ooh, that's
On a regular basis. Because, like, let's be honest. Like, how often do you go on a
very
structure
good point.
where you actually get to do something, right? Very rarely.
Yeah.
And even then, like, it's a huge team effort, right? But like, how much recognition do you really get? And I'm not saying it's about the recognition, because it's not. Like, I don't do this job to get recognized. I do this job because I love it. But I mean, like, it's instant gratification. You get to see a direct impact of your job on a regular basis, on a daily, multiple times a day. You get to see a direct impact of your work.
Oh, that's such a great point. That is such a good point. Wish I'd have thought of that one.
Yeah. And then also, right, like, let's be honest, because most people, we say, oh, we got into this job because, like, we care about people, we want to do good, we want to help people, right? And then, like, that fades because you get so tired of people abusing the 911 system.
Yes.
And people, so, like, instead of thinking about it like, oh, I'm going to go help this person, I'm going to go make a difference, just think of yourself as being a people mechanic, right? It's making this noise, I got to do this to fix it. So, like, just look at it in a different perspective. So it's not you like, oh, I've got to take care of this person, I've got to be caring, blah blah blah. And I'm not saying to be a robot, I'm not saying to be unempathetic. Also, side note, I think that's a lot of what it is too, is that, like, sometimes you have to have that empathy, and some people are really not good at getting in touch with the feels.
True.
But if you don't want to run the EMS calls, just think of it as like their boiler's broken, or like the AC is not working, or like a fan belt. I don't know, like, whatever. Just view yourself as a people mechanic, and it makes things a little bit different.
Yeah, that's such a good way to explain that. I mean, because you really think that, yeah, I mean, there are some of those calls, and I think that's a hard part too. Is like, you're there on the fire side, and it's like you're almost there, like, start to finish on a lot of things, right? But like on the EMS side, it's like, oh well, we did these things and we handled it off, and like, did what we did really work?
Yeah.
Right? Like the fire side, like we know, like, hey, this tactic really works. Like, we got to see it through and through firsthand. Like, yeah, this type of, rope rigging really works, or this method of extrication works. Like, we basically saw it start to finish. Whereas EMS, we're like, we did some things, and they're like, here you go, and then, well, what happened? Then it's just crickets.
Well,
Right?
so
Like, we don't
that's
hear
what's
anything
nice
else after
about
that.
so that's what's nice about our software, right? So when most of the time, depending on what hospital we transport to, we actually get to see the outcomes. Like, we see
That's
what they
awesome.
did, like the labs and stuff like that. And if not, we can always, like, request it through our EMS chief and be like, hey, could we get a follow up on this? But then also something that I do, so that way, because we do the automatic aid, and I obviously talk about it with my crews and be like, hey, like, when we come back from the call, be like, hey man, like, I did this and they got better, or I'm just like, I did this and, like, we have no idea. But I try and follow up with people from the different agencies that we run with, to be like, hey, like, I just want to let you know that, like, this is what happened, to help get them more engaged, right? Because a
Yeah,
lot of times
100%.
you're just like, did what I do make an impact? Like, did it make a difference? And so, like, that's kind of the little blasé about it, right? Is that you don't have that follow up. You don't know if you made a difference. You don't know the outcome. Like, did they live? Did they die? Like, what happened? And so getting them more engaged, also, like, having people, because that's the thing, right? Because you have people that are just super knowledgeable, right? But they don't know how to deliver that knowledge to keep people entertained. So, and then talking above them. So I think that also might be part of the firefighters' issues as well, is that, like, once you get to a certain spot in medicine, right, you're like talking way above them, and you're just like using these words, this, that, and the other. So they seem dumb. So talk about it in a way that makes sense. Be like, oh yeah, no, see this right here, this is wonky. It's not supposed to do this. It's supposed to do this. And just, like, sometimes EMS has a tendency to talk down to firefighters, thinking that they're dumb, and they're not. They haven't found a way to learn that makes it fun.
Yeah, the note that I had about, like, where EMS can learn from fire learn from EMS, is in things of, really, with communications, like command and control, right? Like, EMS is not good with the incident command system, and like what, like, chain of command is. And I'm not saying, like, getting on, like, filling out your ICS forms and all that stuff. Like, not that, but just general like command structure and communication and quick problem solving.
Yep.
Right. Like going from an EMS side to fire side, like how problems get handled at an EMS station versus how they are handled within a firehouse, two completely different worlds. Right. And you think about how, the fire service is just like bing, bang, boom, pow. And that's why I think makes some fire-based EMS so good at their job because they do have that experience of being very big critical thinkers, thinking on your feet and having that necessity to react. Whereas EMS, I feel like that sometimes they get spun around. Like it takes you a little bit harder to make a decision because there isn't really command and control and consistent uh, functionality of those things. Where the fire service is very organized and well structured. EMS a lot of
Or
times
straight down
isn't. It's
the ass.
yeah, it's EMS a lot of times can be a free for all. That the private side is like, well, we got 7 ambulances on the road. Well, who's in charge of what?
Yeah.
And like there isn't always a great structure to do. So they're more of, you think from the education world, if you think that you give people multiple options, that is a slow of your cognition. Where fire service is more like see this, do this, and it's like reactive. Where EMS is more like, well, you just kind of figure it out on your own. And there's not a lot of good shared experiences, like you're saying about, hey, this what worked well, and like tearing that back down is just kind of a just figure it out. And sometimes it just never gets figured out. And I see that, this is complete anecdotal, but between like the fire service and EMS, like fire based EMS versus private EMS, much longer on scene times, much longer at patient contact, like getting to the patient, getting interventions done, rapid stabilization, like scene size up, right? Like you go to fire and it's like quick 360, evaluate this, do this, do this, do this. And like people just flock and do things. Where EMS, like that team leadership isn't there because your fireside, like they kind of look to a person, like they know who's going to be in charge of making decisions. The EMS is like me, you, me, you, me. I mean, it's like the night at the Roxbury's. I like me, you, me, us, them. Like everybody's pointing fingers. They don't know who's in charge, what to do, and
Yep.
nothing's really clicking. So anecdotally, I see that like longer on scene times, longer times to do interventions in the private EMS, even though we do have his longer transports. And whether that's, just, private EMS having higher frequencies and getting a little bit more burnout maybe than the fire side, I don't know. Research to be determined. But um, I think that command and control aspect is really what's lacking in EMS to be more efficient, right? Because in other podcasts, I've made a stance that anymore EMS is not emergency medical services, it's efficient medical services, right? We just need to be efficient in our operations. A lot of things we're doing are not true emergencies. We just need to show up and provide care and render aid. That's pretty much it. But
Well, and
just
then
do it efficiently.
yeah, kind of going on that note of like the fire and then private EMS. That's where like so there's several. So like Colorado Springs Fire, for an example, has AMR running their calls, right? And it's notorious that they don't get along. Like they butt heads, right? Because let's be honest, a lot of times, like when you become a paramedic in a private ambulance, like you see more calls than they do most of the time because you are designated to the entire area versus just that one district, right? So like
Yeah.
whatever. So then a lot of times the private ambulance will come on scene and be like, oh, like you don't know what you're doing. So they kind of talk down to them and they treat them like,
Yeah.
well, like shit. And so that creates like a big old rift, right? Because there's no cohesion, there's no team effort, whatever. It's like to be completely blunt, like it's a deck measuring contest. Like, oh, like fire ALS versus like private EMS, and they're just like, oh, well, you're not doing this right. Well, you're not doing this. Well, you're not doing that. Blah blah blah. And so it makes it really hard to have the cohesion. So like the private ambulance doesn't understand like what they see, and then if they haven't ever worked on an ambulance, they don't know what it's like being on the ambulance where you're running back to back calls and you're hungry and all you want is a warm meal, but like you might get it lukewarm if you get a chance to make it to a microwave. Like sometimes you just get a gas station snack, or you get something from the EMS lounge at the hospital. But also like the one thing that I like about being the fire-based EMS is that, like, when we do run calls, there is that command structure, right? So, like, we all know who's in charge for what scene. We all
Yeah.
know what's supposed to happen for what. So, like, we all know where we fall within those roles. So it makes it a lot more cohesive.
Yeah, spot on. Like, you don't know where they're coming from till you've been in their shoes. Yeah, like I think that that cohesiveness, like you took the words right out of my mouth. We were talking about them like, oh yeah, the cohesiveness is not there. Cohesiveness, that was tough. But yeah, you took it like right out of my head. But yeah, that's such a good point that we just don't really both understand each side. And I think back to my first career department I worked at. I showed up and I was like, it kind of always made this goal is like, we're here first. We're always, the engine's always being the names there, just strategically placed stations. In the city I worked for, first city was 4 stations, 4 fire stations, 1 EMS station that had to cover the entire city. So engines got there first. It's like, I always want to do as much as I can. So when AMA shows up, basically all they got to do is like load them and go because I've already done all the stabilization, full assessments, everything. And I remember one of those first calls, it was like bing, bang, boom, just knocking stuff out. And, it was like the EMS showed up and they just kind of looked at me like, okay. And then they started completely over. And I was irate. I'm like, what is the purpose of me being here then?
Right.
Like, there's no continuity of care and there's no cohesiveness. Now, since the new systems, one thing I did see that really improved was at that particular department, nobody was working EMS part time. And then as years went on, and some people kind of started being like, oh, maybe EMS isn't so bad. And it became more accepted there, as I think it is in most other departments too. So not a bash, but I think fire-based EMS and EMS first response and fire departments is getting better, right? Um, but then as people from the fire department started working EMS part-time and they really understood both sides of everything that was happening. And that made everything on scene much more efficient because it was familiar faces, there was cohesiveness, and like people were actually on the same page.
Yes.
And I think that's what really works well. And like fire-based EMS, like you're around the same people, you know each other, like you're kind of a one-stop shop for it. So that also makes the efficiency so much better because you're working with your peers that you're not your peers, but people you live with a third of your life, right? So things just happen and nobody even has to talk because you're just on that same page. So, but all that ties into outside of stuff of training, just interacting and just getting along with one another, really.
Yep. Well, and so one of the things, because I used to work for AMR and Polo, and I will be perfectly honest, I loved it. I don't know many of the originals there, but one of the things that I learned um, was that when fire was on scene, like, it's their scene until they hand it over to me, right?
Yeah.
It's their scene. They were there first. So then, like, I would come up and, like, for the person who was taking notes, I'd be like, hey, like, what's going on? So that way I could get a report from them. But I wouldn't interrupt the questioning that was happening. If there was a question that I needed to ask, I would ask it after they were done doing their assessment. And I would preface this by saying, so that way I wouldn't make it seem like I was undermining the ALS provider on scene. I'd be like, hey, there's a solid chance that my partner already asked you this, but I wasn't here to hear it. And it may have been something that, the person forgot to pass on to me, but I'm like, and then I would ask my question. And then either the patient would answer for me or the provider that had asked that question, if they had asked it, would tell me, oh yeah, I asked him that. And then here's what they said. And so, like, if there were things that I didn't agree on, right? Like, as long as it wasn't hurting the patient, cool, that's their scene. And then they would hand it over to me. And then in the back of the ambulance, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this, X, Y, and Z. So that way I wouldn't make it seem like I was undermining them, but I was still doing my job and doing what needed to be done. And then later, again, I would follow up with that particular crew and be like, hey, this is what happened, because it wasn't as easy for them to get a follow-up. So that was one of the things that I liked to do, so that way I could trust those crews and they knew that they could trust me, and we could have that cohesiveness even though we were two separate entities.
Wow. Like soft skills and communication. That's crazy how far those little things can take you.
The pinnacle of my career at AMR in Pueblo was I was on the night shift. I think it was like 5A to or 5P to 5A, something like that. And or maybe it doesn't matter. I was working night shift. And we were running like back to back to back calls with Station One. Like we had run like several calls with them already. So one of the last calls that we ran with them that night, they were like, "Hey, we're not," because it was like 4 a.m. They're like, "We're not going back to bed. Whenever you're done at the hospital, if you want to come by and have a cup of coffee, yeah, come on down to the station." And
Very cool.
yeah, and then after we dropped that patient off, I turned to my partner because it was two of the grumpiest guys at the department, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I just want you to know this is a huge deal because not everyone gets an invite to go to the stations to have coffee, especially by these people, because these people pretty much hate everybody. Because I mean, like they're grumpy, and let's be honest, in the privates, there's a huge turnover. So for them to even know your name, let alone invite you to the station for coffee, that's a big deal. That means that you are doing something right. And that's what people forget is that the soft skills, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how good of a paramedic you are. If you don't have those people skills, those soft skills, that empathy, whatever, you're not going to do well on either side.
100%. Man, it's almost like you see that and it's like, wow, I've made it. Yeah.
That,
So
that was the
if we could
pinnacle
all
of
just,
my career.
you know, if fire and EMS could just get along, then everybody realized that it's okay just to do both jobs and to be good at everything and just really embrace and like your job, things would just go a lot better. Just show up, enjoy what you're there for, and you get to that point where you don't want to help people anymore. Go find another job.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Cool.
And that's the hard part is that realizing that I can't do their job as good as they can, and they likely can't do my job as good as I can. So we need to figure out where our weaknesses are and our strengths are so that way we can be a team. It's kind of like when I do fire stuff, like because I like fire stuff, so I do the training stuff like that. But like me pulling a 6'4", 280-pound guy without SCBA and a bull bunker is going to be hard in general, right? Likely not impossible, but improbable. It could happen, whatever. I know that I'm not going to be good at that, right? But do you think that that person is going to be great at confined spaces?
Very good point.
So it's all about like, and here's the hard part, right? You have to admit your weaknesses. You have to embrace them, and you have to work with them with your team,
100%.
both medical and fire.
Yes, 100%. Jennah, you've made some fantastic points, and that's why I was so excited to have you on with this because I knew you would give all these great insights. I think we've got a lot more fuel that we can go in and throw another episode in this somewhere down the road. But yeah, such great insights. I want to thank you for joining in. It's been great talking to you the past hour.
Yes.
And also applause to you because you again made it over an hour without saying a single swear word. So
I think I said a couple, but not a lot. I did lose that bet at work in an hour.
I mean, if you did, you've done really well with it. I mean, you used the words very well, sentence enhancers. So I did not even catch it. So kudos to you.
Drop an F-bomb. So that right there should earn me some points.
Very good. Well, Jennah, thank you for joining in. And stay tuned. I'm sure we'll rendezvous again for one of these in the near future.
Sounds great.
All right, Jennah. Thank you.
Thank you.